Hey everybody, welcome to today's video, which is part 6 of my Ford Ranger Turbo project. In the last video, I left off with some of the stuff that I had left to do, including the intercooler and charge piping and a couple other odds and ends. What I want to do today is talk about what I did there and what I have left to do with this project to get it finished out. In the last video, I talked about how I was going to do a water-to-air intercooler setup, and I did end up doing that. As you can see here, I mounted an intercooler right where the air box used to be. And this is a completely self-contained system that has its own pump and coolant. You can see here there's a separate fill point, and back in the corner there you can see there's an overflow tank that I added as well. The pump for the system is hidden below the intercooler there, sort of underneath of where the headlight would be, and then the actual heat exchanger that would be out in front, normally where you put an air-to-air intercooler, is still in that same position, and it has a fan that's used to cool that. There were a few challenges that doing this water-air setup presented to me that I really didn't think about ahead of time before I decided to do it. And probably the biggest one would be space constraints that this put on me. As you can see, the piping runs are very short. The turbo is right there. The run to the intake manifold is just a short run like that. And so that didn't leave a whole lot of piping to put the things in the piping that I needed. And normally with an air-to-air intercooler, you'd have a little bit more room to play with that because you got a lot longer pipe runs that run out into the grill area. So you can have a little bit more freedom to place those where you want. So in my case, like I said, I was very limited. I ended up putting the intake air temperature sensor here, mass airflow sensor here, and the blow-off valve is actually right here, and it's angled so it's actually under the other charge pipes, and you can't even really see it. And I fought with that arrangement for quite a while, just trying to get it right and make sure everything could fit correctly and still operate as it should. And in the end, I think it'll work just fine. It was just some extra effort that had to go into this just to use this type of intercooler. Another challenge that I ran into was leaks. I had a couple persistent leaks in this setup that I had to end up taking the system apart for to repair those. So it was kind of a pain in the butt to have to go through that, a couple of different iterations to get it right. Coupling that with the space constraints that I had, it made this kind of a pain in the butt to work on. For the intercooler's pump and heat exchanger fan, I wired it up a little bit differently than I did my radiator fan setup. I have the electric fan from my engine radiator hooked up to a controller that kicks on and off at a certain temperature. There's a probe in the radiator that measures the temperature, and when it gets to a certain point, the fan kicks on and kicks back off whenever the engine's cooled down. And that's to regulate, the engine temperature and keep it at a certain point. With the intercooler, I wanted this to be running all of the time to keep the charge temperature down to as cool as possible. So the fan and the pump do run all of the time when the ignition's turned on. The fan's a little noisier than I anticipated, but I think once the engine's running and things like that, you're not actually really going to notice it too much, but we'll see. So on to other work that I did since the last video. I mentioned I had to put in the new injectors, and so I did do that. This now has 60-pound injectors versus the factory ones, which I think were under 20 somewhere. So I did do that along with the mass airflow sensor installation. I also have a catch can that I installed right here. This engine ended up having ports for 2 PCV valves. That's because I use a Ford Thunderbird valve cover, which had a port for it. And then these Rangers have an oil separator with a PCV valve underneath the intake manifold. Both of those points, I removed the PCV valves and put in fittings, and then ran hoses out to go right to the catch can here. I'm not sure how much oil that's actually going to get in it because I did leave the factory oil separator in place. So I expect a lot of the oil to stay there and only mostly vapor to get to the actual catch can, but we'll see what it does. All right, so as of right now, all of the fab work and hardware installation is all complete. The engine is ready to go at this point. It has run before, as you saw in the last video, but the challenge that we have right now is going to be tuning. Right now, this truck's basically a paperweight until I can tune it. It will not run. With the injectors in it, it floods it out very quickly. So I tried to start it a couple of times and it would sputter and run a little bit, but I didn't want to keep doing that because how much fuel that I'm sure that it's dumping into the cylinders. So right now, it's not going to run until I get the tuning completed. On the tuning front, I was originally looking for someone to go ahead and tune this truck for me. I've since changed my mind on that, and I'm going to go ahead and tune this myself. I'll be using a hardware-software combination called Tweaker. It's Tweecer. This is a tuning method that's been around for quite some time, and I think it's fairly popular for people trying to tune Ford EEC computers of this generation, this era, basically from the 80s through the 90s and early 2000s. So I currently have that on order. I think there's a little bit of a delay in getting that here, so it's probably going to be a few more weeks till I get it in and can start to play around with it. It's not something I've used with or I'm very familiar with. So until it gets here, I'm going to spend my time doing some homework and make sure I understand how it works and what I have to do to get this truck going. And then we'll go from there. All right, so that's where we are with the turbo project right now. The rest of the truck has gotten a couple other upgrades recently too. As you can see, the front bumper has been blacked out. I got rid of the chrome bumper. I still have to do the rear bumper, but that'll be done here pretty soon. I also ended up with a new set of wheels and tires recently. Now the truck is running a 17 by 9 in the front and a 17 by 10.5 in the back. They're SVE 0304 Cobra replicas. So I have a 275 tire on the front and a 315 on the back. The 315 is probably a little overkill for this truck, but I like the look, so that's what I decided to go with. I mentioned in the last video that I was installing a wideband O2 sensor. I did get that installed complete, and like I said, I was going to put that in the vent pod right here on the dash, and I think that turned out pretty well as well. I also recently came across a good deal on a set of leather seats from a Ford Explorer, so I installed those, and I'm pretty happy with them as well. All right, everybody, that's pretty much all I have for today's video. Like I said, this thing's pretty much ready to go aside from tuning. So our next video, which may end up being the final one for this project series, I'll probably do something on the tuning, or at least, once I've gotten it running, we'll do some sort of running and driving video. But that's where we are right now. Thanks for watching as always, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you liked today's video, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.